Hey, what's up guys? My name is Azoh, and today I'd like to talk about this sort of a Z buff tease that Medler made on his quick gameplay thoughts of August 8th on the 7.17 balance changes, sort of tweaks and ideas that they have. And he wrote that Zed's underperforming a bit, with the exception of periods where any of his core items are overtuned. His damage is still pretty solid though, so we're looking at other buffs instead, with a W duration increase 4.5 seconds to 5 seconds currently on the cards. I think this is interesting, and I actually kind of agree. I can't remember the last time where Zed was completely batshit crazy just because of him being a champion. It's more to do with when lethality was changed and people figured out that you can get an immense amount of it at the start when they buffed lethality from 0.4 to 0.6, when Duskblade was changed recently, and so on with Bork and everything. He's had many times where they try to tweak the items, not really thinking about him specifically, and he gets a benefit as a result of that. And it's interesting, because this sort of a buff is not really what you'd see him explode through the ranks or anything like that from. It's not something that will make him absolutely demolish the early game, but it is actually going to fix something that I'm 100% certain they did not expect, which is funny because they didn't expect the other nerf to have that effect as well. So basically, you saw me talking about this some time back where they increased the E cooldown of Zed early game and then made it lower late game than what it was before, which is a very strange change overall. It's sort of a nerf overall on the board because you're still limited by energy. So even if it has a 2-second cooldown or something crazy like that, you won't be able to use it anyway that much because you're limited by your energy. But they also made it so that it's so long at the start. I believe 5 seconds. I don't have the actual numbers in my head, but it was so long at the start, at level 1, that before you had any CDR, that you couldn't actually do WE and then E again. But now you can. 0.5 seconds is actually enough. If my math isn't completely wrong, which it very well might be. This should be enough for you to do a WE and then E again while the W is still up, which is actually pretty great. This 0.5 second extra duration of the W is not going to be groundbreaking. We're actually breaking ground by going back to what we had before, which is pretty standard for Riot. I mean, let's talk about Doran's Blade a bit, but it's interesting because this also means that you won't actually have to go up to a very, very high amount of CDR to be able to do a WEQ, EQ, which is something you could do sometime back where you throw a W with the EQ as a standard poke, and then usually around sieging late game, you can do a you can do the EQ on the W a second time, and possibly even engage on the same W for a very, very unexpected secondary burst, which is quite great, but now you could do it even earlier. But the funny thing about this, if they're going with this buff, this is very preliminary, is that it's not really going to make him completely batshit crazy, as I said. This is a very sophisticated buff, to sound seriously pretentious, but it is actually a pretty sophisticated buff because it doesn't make him snowball in a way different. It just opens up something that they locked away before and makes it accessible a bit earlier. Possibly even changing some CDR builds, though this is so very, very unspecific that I don't think you're going to see any changes in builds or anything like that. This is just something where you're unlocking it a little bit earlier. I don't think you'd rush like Cleaver first item. I think you'd still go for the same items and potentially just... No, I don't think we'd see any kind of change in builds because of this. But it is interesting because this does open up a lot more threatening early game where you throw a W for zoning, and that W is going to last for 5 seconds. Not only is that an extra E, that could also be a potential extra Q. That is very big. It's most certainly an extra E, which means you can do WE to get the farm, or poke, and that W remains a threat. People who do play Zed and do understand Zed will know that currently when you throw a WE and you don't have CDR, that in the early game, that W is not really that scary. You can jump to it, but if you do, you're going to be in the enemy minions without a W, without an E, doing fuck all, except taking damage. So that W is not really threatening. Now, if they go through with this change, that W is going to be really scary again. Not supremely scary to where you're pissing your pants about it, but scary enough to the point where you have a zone of threatening. You have a threatening zone. Zone of threatening. You have a threatening zone that you force them out of, which is actually quite nice. I think this is one of the more interesting buffs I've ever seen them do on Zed. Many times I've had issues with them buffing straight up scaling or anything like that, but this is just interesting. It was the same thing, similar thing when they increased the range of W, but even that, increasing the range of W made him quite dominant because it doesn't really change much of his playstyle, it just kind of makes it so that it's better overall. This just might actually change up some dynamics of the lane. Not sure, I might very well be overanalyzing this, but as someone who's played Zed a lot, way too much, you might even say, this is quite exciting for me. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I do hope they go through with it. I don't think Zed is underpowered right now. I really don't. I actually wasn't even expecting a buff at all. Then again, I play somewhat less, much less than I used to, so I can't actually give you a very proper update on the game balance right now, but I do know that if this goes through, I'll be very happy, because this is not gonna make him like super uber banned, but yeah, it's just a smooth, nice addition to the game, I think, for him. And I don't think it's going to change much for lower elos or when you're playing as people who don't play Zed, because most people would still be just afraid of the shadow as it is. Most people aren't really aware of the fact that at the start you can't do WE and another E. They're just going to be afraid of the shadow because it's a shadow. Maybe Zed's going to jump to it and do some faker shit. You never know. But higher elo players or people who are aware might have to think twice now. And it also opens up, if you fucked up by doing WE and you didn't get the last hit, you have a chance of getting it on the second go around of the E. And if you need extra damage to clear a minion wave completely, well, you have that. So it really opens up way more than you'd expect. And of course, this also means that you have a longer time of this threatening zone. Not only does it mean that you can do another E, it means that the zone remains for 5.5 seconds longer. And 0.5 seconds might not sound like much, but how many of you felt the Duskblade slow, which is 0.25 seconds? You do feel it. You do feel it. And this is an extra 0.5 seconds. So, exciting to see this. I really hope they go through with it. Again, I don't think Zed is underpowered right now by any extent, but if I missed something, do let me know. I know you guys will. Yeah, let me know. Hope you guys have fun, and good luck with the games. Peace.